So y'all have heard the rumors that the season is changing.
Yep.
And that, what have you heard actually? Let me not plant it.
Okay. I've heard that CrossFit season is going to go completely online with the exception of the CrossFit Games. So that means for everybody, not just the Masters athletes now, but the individuals are also going to be doing open, quarterfinals, semifinals, if we're going to call it semifinals, all in an online format versus what we've done in the past where they would do the quarterfinals and then move on to a live semifinal. The only exception to that would be the COVID year.
Has this been confirmed from CrossFit? It's just still a rumor.
I just saw it as I think I saw it as an Instagram
I've heard it from
post,
a lot of reliable people.
and I saw it on a Reddit post.
I don't think they've posted anything. All the age group athletes are saying, well, what's changed?
It's no different. That's exactly what I said to Chris a little bit ago. I was like, well, it's just my season for the last few years,
Yeah.
except for this past year where they expanded the number of qualifying spots. But literally, that's just what I've done for the last 3 years is I did the open, quarterfinals, semifinals, and then I would miss by 2 spots and not get to go to the games, and so I had no live event.
I was going to ask him a question just real quick before we actually dive into it. So then, since you've done that, and all the age group athletes that are listening, they've done that same thing. Do you prefer that, or would you like it if there were online or in-person competition after quarterfinals?
Okay, I love in-person competition. That's why I participate in CrossFit as a sport. I love getting to go and actually compete and throw down. I think a big part of it is I like meeting the people that are there. They tend to be very like-minded.
It's awesome,
and
especially in the Masters
And you're
categories.
an extrovert in some ways.
Yeah, I feel like I'm an extrovert when I'm around people who are interested in the same thing I am. And it turns out when I go to a CrossFit, when I go to the CrossFit Games, everybody's interested in the same thing I am, or else I wouldn't be there. But with that being said, I have given feedback every year to HQ about the qualifying process, and every year I've said the same thing. Please stop giving us online qualifiers. I think it would have been great for us as Masters athletes to just do the open and age group quarters and move on. There's so much, especially when you are potentially in a qualifying spot, there's so much pressure to make sure that your measurements are right, your video is right, that you've met the standards. Sometimes they change the standard like an hour or 2 hours after they send it out. They're like, oh yeah, I forgot to tell you, your hips have to stay here on the GHD, where we get the email like a day later letting us know that the standards changed. And they just put all of the onus on you to get everything right versus when you go to a live competition, like you just go out there, they say, hey, here are the standards, you go do the thing. And if your judge doesn't call a no rep, then it's a good rep. So it's like that feels like a lot more stress and pressure, and it puts a lot of stress and pressure on the affiliate and the people that are helping you run, because you got to have a team of like 3 or 4 people to effectively run yourself through one of the online qualifiers. So I think that's going to be one of the big challenges that people face. So to answer your question,
Long-winded.
I would vastly prefer that it's just all in person. Like maybe you do one central universal qualifier that like you do the open, you finish high enough, you can compete in like elite level divisions or something like that. I think that would be way better.
I think it's a pipe dream. I don't think that's going to be happening this year.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think that would be the ideal thing.
Well, I mean, the challenge there is just the finances behind it, right? To set up,
100%.
how would you even do it for Masters? I know we're going off topic here, but I'd be interested to, how would you set it up if you were the director of sport?
Okay, so I've actually given this a fair bit of thought. What I think would work is that you would say, all right, we have all of these already financially viable competitions, Wadapalooza, FOTC, Legends, et cetera, and you just say, hey, these competitions now become, and I just listed ones in the U.S., like there's also French throwdown, German throwdown, like we could go through a huge list of like 15 potential qualifying competitions. The top 2 or the top 3 athletes at each of those events in the Masters division, the Pro division, the team division, they all qualify for the CrossFit Games or the World Championships or whatever you want to call it. Each of those events are already financially viable. They all run every single year, and they continue to run every single year because they are at least somewhat profitable.
And they have all the divisions already set up.
Correct.
Other than team.
We know they're profitable.
We know that they're profitable, or they wouldn't continue to run. Some of those events are like
some people would run at a loss for a long-term equity thing. But I'm guessing that the big ones are at least breaking even or turning.
That's where I'm
profit.
going. They're 8 to 10 years deep. So if you're not running at least at a break even for 8 to 10 years, like you either have really deep pockets, which is unlikely in this sport, or you're making enough to make it so that you can do it every single year.
Yeah.
So they already exist. They're already financially viable from that perspective. And then all you would need is the world championships to draw from that circuit, essentially.
It's basically the sanctional model.
Yes, it's the sanctional model.
And one of the, before you ask the question, the other rumor I heard, I don't know if this is rumors, like I haven't watched every video of every media reporter, but that they are trying to then have some sort of sanctional system alongside the online one. But I think that would only be for the elites and teams, because that's all the CrossFit Games was last year anyway. So I don't think that would extend to
Masters. I've heard that you could do online sanctional or a in-person sanctional. And you'll have the choice, is what I heard.
Yeah. It's still kind of unfortunate that these are all just rumors and we don't know.
I still think that qualifying system that I laid out would be a much better qualifying system for getting the best athletes. Now, there's problems. There's some inherent problems with that, right? I think one of those inherent problems is standardization of programming across all those events. But I've gone back and forth with people about this, and I don't think it has to be standardized. I think there just needs to be a clear set. Okay, if there's going to be 5 events, then, each of these buckets needs to be tested across those 5 events, like a long event. I actually talked to Brent Fikowski about this a little bit, and he had really good insights on like what those buckets might actually, what they might need to be or what they should look like. But I think that's one of the biggest hurdles. But once you solve that hurdle, which could easily be solved, I think you could use this as a qualifying system for Masters too, not just teams and individuals. And I also heard there was not going to be a team.
What are we talking about?
Yeah, I heard there wasn't going to be a team division.
I'm so lost right now.
You're lost for real? Yeah. Brandon asked Kyle about the season structure, and Kyle was giving his opinion.
I've obviously thought about this.
Kyle's been thinking about this.
Yeah, Kyle's
Max and I are just listening to Kyle
talk about what he wants the Masters sport to look like.
I tell you.
Hold on, let's circle back.
Yeah.
If this is true and it's online, what are y'all's general thoughts? I go a little more in depth on what you think the implications and what that might mean for.
So I'm not. Kyle's like upset about maybe the lack of in-person, which I get. I feel like if I were a competitive sporting athlete in CrossFit right now, the best thing to do is compete in person. They're like huge life experiences and big events. And it really is where like pressure matters. If you're in your gym, you do a workout, you could get 5 seconds into it, start tripping double unders and just stop and restart the clock. So if you're a real competitive athlete, who's trying to be a professional, the in-person nature of it is like one of the things that I feel like drives it. But for most people in the sport at an affiliate level or a non-professional level, I kind of think that the online structure with if they have the opportunities of sanctionals to get to scratch that itch is actually kind of cool. I think it actually over time, if they set it up right, could take pressure off the affiliate owners and off the coaches, because then we don't have to pay to, like, the semifinal weekends as a kind of full-time coach. When I was in most coaching mode, I was traveling for 3 straight weekends. I'm at the quarterfinals. The quarterfinals is basically like a dead time to work, and it is a huge lift to manage the complexity of that season. So I think that it could be a move in the right direction. But my other thoughts are that it's going to get a lot of negative feedback from the most important athletes from a visibility at the professional level. So it's the kind of a decision that I think is going to continue to expand that riff of like, are we serving the affiliates and the people that like don't do this as professional athletes? They do it to be fit. It's their hobby. They're passionate. They want some structure to it. I think this move could be maybe better for them.
But it doesn't change anything for them. This only changes something for people who are semifinal athletes, because they weren't going to make it to semifinals anyway. So in the end, the decision to change the season to all online, now we're assuming, we're basing this on rumor, but assuming that is the case, the only people that it affects are the ones who are going to qualify for semifinals. So people that just do it recreationally, they weren't going to qualify.
Like the system was the same no matter what.
It's no change for them at all. For everybody else, for anybody who isn't a semifinal level bubble athlete or like perennial semifinal level athlete, nothing changes. And like, I'm not upset because my season didn't change. It's exactly the same for me as it has been forever. I just think that it's a regression step for this as a professional sport.
Well, I think I think that's the issue that most people will have with it, or at least if I'm thinking as a growth of the sport, this is probably going to hinder that. And as we've talked about in many podcasts before, even 3-4 years ago, when we're talking about, okay, how can we grow the sport? The reason we want the sport to grow is so that all the hobbyists can also continue to improve in this passion that they have, right? So the more people that are putting eyes on the sport on ESPN or CBS, whoever's going to air it, more people come into the gym, more people get healthy, which is what I care about most, right? Like a lot of the athletes that we work with want to be competitive, but we also have this huge group of athletes in our online programs or even individual athletes that they just come to us and say, hey, look, I want to get healthy again. And to me, that probably matters more than the competitive sport because we're actually making a difference in people's lives. So if the sport starts to kind of dissipate because they can't get it together and they can't figure things out at the top of the sport, then it kind of hurts all those or trickles down to where it kind of slowly dies out and there's no open or quarterfinals and people have to find other things. That may not be a bad thing, but that's my concern with just, okay, we don't have the finances, so what we're going to do is throw everything online and just kind of hope everyone goes with it and we'll see what happens. To Max's point, though, I do think that the positive here is for those that maybe are the hobbyist. Max, I was talking to you before we got on. I was like, we go and play golf, and we're never trying to make the PGA Tour. But you and I, one day for him. But we legitimately love to play, and we love to be competitive just against each other. So we'll go out and play to have fun. And I think that's where most CrossFitters are, but they also want to go out to, I want to go to a nice course and play where maybe pros are playing. So in the same way, like maybe people want to go to a Wadapalooza or a Fittest of the Coast because high-level athletes go there and they get to do similar workouts. So we need to have a competitive structure. Maybe that just is completely different than what HQ is doing. And so we organize more competitions, or we tell or encourage our athletes to go to competition. So that's the way that they get their fun.
I think that is the benefit. So you have like the tip of the spear of like, okay, I make the games, whether you're a pro or a masters or whatever, like that is a super, super small percentage. Then you have the like, I'm an affiliate member and I'm trying to use CrossFit to be healthy. So I participate in the open and maybe quarterfinals. And then there's that tier in between, which is like, it could be really serious affiliate-based people that like to compete as hobbyists, or it could be people that are like on their come up where they're trying to get to that next level of athlete. In the past, and really for the last couple of years, I remember a conversation I had with Adam prior to the game stuff, is he was saying, hey, I think we should really try to disincentivize our, we call those maybe like bubble athletes, those bubble people from investing.
Define that real quick.
Well, people that are going to work really hard to try to make it to semifinals. Like they're competitive enough at the quarterfinal level. It was really that top 10% where quarterfinals was in the past. They moved it to 75, but let's say the upper tier of that group that could potentially in the future be a semifinal athlete, be a sanctional athlete, be a games athlete, but they need reps and competition. We felt like the CrossFit season was kind of underserving them because they weren't getting the competition experience. So we're trying to devalue it to them. It's like, hey, still take it seriously and step in and learn how to compete online really well. But spending from February to May only on this thing that you're almost 100% sure you're not going to qualify through might be a mistake. If you find a competition in March or April, you should probably do it. I feel like this change just gives them like, all right, well now like go compete, go out there and go to real competitions. They're popping up. And I think what happened and kind of the discontent in the market, there's people that realize, okay, there's an opportunity here to do more things. There's smaller scale competitions like Crash, both the team and the individual one that are happening on a lower scale, but still offering kind of prize money where that group of people is now having the opportunity to compete more often.
They also offer the kind of programming that you would experience if you were going to a semifinal or even the CrossFit Games. Like they pride themselves on creating that kind of
heavy, hard.
I think the decision that CrossFit has made, if this is an official decision, right? I have to caveat that. To make this an online season, they've disincentivized doing the CrossFit season for those athletes, for the ones that are potentially bubble athletes. They're like, hey, there's no chance that you're going to get to compete in a live event, assuming that they don't get any sanctionals or, the live events connected to the CrossFit season. It makes way more sense for those people to go compete in Crash, Fittest to the Coast, Wadapalooza, whatever the events are. Those are just the ones that have been
off the top of your head.
Yeah, they're like they just happened or the qualifiers just happened. But the incentive is there for those athletes, those bubble athletes, to go out and create their own season. There's no longer a reason to put all the eggs in the semifinal basket, because semifinals is just going to be something that you do in your gym.
Yeah, and there's no opportunity for the last place team that qualifies for semifinal. That was a major, like, oh, this is awesome. I now get to go and have this experience. Now the last place team that qualifies in is like, all right, you get another opportunity to go hard in your gym, but you're not going to the games. So, yeah, I don't know.
How much do you think that matters? Because I think when you strip it down, if you were saying that you would present to those bubble level athletes, hey, maybe this is a better idea anyway, how much do we think that the drive to progress to a games is a deciding factor for people or a motivating factor? Do you lose anything when it's just, hey, go do really well at Wadapalooza and that there's no advancement? Do you feel like that impacts people's psychology to want to do it?
Yeah, I mean, I do think like there's handicap systems in golf where people like to get to single digit or get to scratch. In martial arts, you have belt systems. I think there was something beautiful that CrossFit tapped into by having like, oh, you're an open athlete or you're a quarterfinal athlete or you're a semifinal athlete or you make it to the games. That tier, I think, created a sense of pride and clear understanding about what level you are as an athlete. But I think with this happening, and I'm sure a re-architecture of the sport in general, there's already been some other rumors about other leagues and other things popping up. Having a ranking system or having these competitions tied together or standardizing, well, what does it mean to be an RX athlete or an intermediate athlete at these competitions? Because intermediate athlete at like Wadapalooza 2 years ago was like elite athlete.
You had to be really good.
So, yeah, like you got to be really, and I was like, hold on, wait, like I consider people intermediate that are like pretty good at all the skills, not like top 300 in the world.
It wasn't that many years ago that Guy won. He qualified for RX at Wadapalooza, won RX at Wadapalooza, and then finished top 10 at the CrossFit Games that year.
Yeah. I mean, Lydia won RX Wadapalooza, right? Or she won.
She was either on the podium
And she was, and then she was all like in the final heat of the semifinals to make it to the games. She was in a qualified
spot for almost the entire competition.
Yeah. So if we standardize, I think, what those things mean, then I think people get the same type of opportunity to realize, oh, I'm getting better. I see the progress of my work that the old system used to provide. But I do think we do need an alternative for that, like an improved ranking system or something that, even we talk about golf. We played in the USAM tour in a competition. It's very clearly defined, like, okay, this is the level. There's heats based on your skill level, and you can feel yourself progressing in that. I do think our sporting structure needs that not for the elites, because I think the elites just want money and opportunity and a place to be more recognized. But I think for that recreational athlete and for the kind of bubble athlete, I think it is really important to have the continuity of the storyline of like, oh, I do this and then that leads to this or something that replaces that.
Do you think that CrossFit's decision to move to this almost all online format or potentially all online format devalues that? It takes away some of that?
I don't think so, to be honest.
You think someone who's like, I qualified for the online semifinal is going to feel as much pride in that progression as they did?
Yeah, I think that's the one group. But how many people qualify for semis?
But they're the only ones that this change matters for.
Yeah, and I think they're going to be really pissed.
Well,
I don't know. Or maybe not. I don't know.
I hear what you're saying. I think the challenge, Max, is just like going back to the whole golf analogy. If we're hitting on a monitor indoors, that's one thing, but we want to go to the course. We want to play in person, and you talked about this earlier, the pressure of holding the club on the last hole, and you got to hit a drive down the middle of the fairway. Even the hobbyist in CrossFit wants to feel that pressure, and maybe you can get that in CrossFit online, but I think it would be even more special if we just had more competitions where they go and they have to hit that lift at the buzzer with 5 other people around them, and they're racing to the finish line or whatever happens in the workout. To do that, though, you talked about all these standards or like a handicap system. Someone at the top would have to build this out. So then every competition would follow this. Or if it's all online, there has to be a very clear system in place.
It will never be CrossFit.
HQ, you mean?
Yeah, HQ. Yeah. Well, I don't want to say never say never. But
is
I think
unlikely.
It would
the
be
likelihood
genius.
of that is very low. The Rogue kind of started with the worldwide ranking
have that
system.
ranking system, yep.
I don't know. I haven't dug into it enough to know how much I agree with the level of complexity. And then I don't think it sorts well for people that are just an open
ranking system's different than a handicap system. I think that's what people don't understand. CrossFit, they really could take the model that golf has, and I know that most of our listeners probably don't know how that system works, but essentially I could compete against Tiger Woods because he has a handicap, a number, and then I would have a number, and we could take strokes hole to hole so that we actually, even though he's beating me hole to hole, if I get within a couple strokes of him, I can win that hole in the same way. Like if I'm racing Kyle, he has a number, I have a number, and we can actually compare against each other, which would be really cool.
And you could standardize the same way there's like male athletes use this weight, female athletes use this weight. I think you could standardize the scaling modifications to say like, okay, if an elite athlete does a workout in this time domain with this many rounds and this movement is scaled by X percentage in weight, always, by X percentage in reps, always. So then the workout would actually maybe be different. I know maybe first masters division might not like that because they're still in their almost in their prime,
like
whatever.
The 35 to 39s.
Yeah, but the way they've done it in the past is 35 to 39, 40 to 45, 45 to 50 are all the same, and then 55 changes.
That's not the right way to approach
it.
We talked about that in the Masters podcast.
Yeah, but a handicap-ish system could, I think, fix that, give people a little bit of the understanding of how they're getting better, give people an understanding of as they're aging what to expect. Because I know there are some we've talked about this in our educational system, the masters athlete paradox, that athletes that got into the sport late and didn't have specific training volume in CrossFit can keep seeing PRs over their 50s and whatever. But for most athletes, there's going to be a deterioration in speed, power, endurance, whatever. You can start to model and educate people out that. And I think it would help with buy-in, because in golf, you can kind of get better until you're 70 or 80 or in high power performance, it's very unlikely. And I think educating people on what that looks like with scales and levels and some sort of a ranking would be helpful.
You guys have been talking about this related to golf, but in swimming, there were very clear time standards that if you hit, 22:49, 50 freestyle, you qualified for sectionals. And if you hit a 21:49, you qualified for junior nationals. And if you hit a 20.49, you qualified for U.S. nationals. If you hit a 19.99, you qualified for Olympic trials, right? Having some sort of standard-based system that tracks your improvement and creates levels, I think, is a motivational tool. I mean, it was an incredibly motivating tool for me as an athlete when I was younger. Just having something that allows you to create some sort of measurement system and ranking system for progress, I think would be...
You know what you're chasing.
Yes, it would be hugely beneficial for this sport. Maybe we need to create that.
I was just thinking that. I was I'm not going to say it out loud. Hey, did you do it yet? I'm no, not yet. Too busy.
Maybe we can start with our throwdowns.
Yeah.
Well, so if I'm HQ and I'm listening to this podcast and my rumor version was correct.
Which rumor version?
So we're basing this all off rumors, but what I heard was that you would still have some sanctionals, but then you'd also have online. They would probably come back with, well, we have basically all we did is we made it, so now you have another option, not that we were taking away, if that's true.
Yeah.
And so from there, why do you think they would want to add an online sanctional? Why do you think that even came up?
Because it saves them money. I think that's it. I think it just comes down to the fact that adding an online sanctional means that they don't have to run as many. And I think, oh, sorry, Chris. And I think it saves them money is one. And also, if they are outsourcing to the sanctionals again, then they're not on the financial hook for running those
Saves them
events.
money.
So it saves them money.
Yeah. I think that is just the decision of why it was done. And I don't think they could have just said sanctionals only because, who are the sanctionals? How many of them are going to say after what happened this past year, hey, we really want to be a sanctional and we really want to be associated with the season. So let's say there's 5 options. What if there's none in Australia? What if there's none in Asia? They couldn't not have an alternative, or they couldn't say, hey, if you're in, Asia, you got to come to, Wadapalooza in Miami to do your competition. So I think it was almost like, it would be like a necessity. And I don't think it'd be extra lift for them to put on. They'd probably just make the Masters and the individual semifinal the same weekend, the same tests. Do you think they would separate them?
No, I think they would try and keep it as simple as possible and do the same thing that they did for quarterfinals where Masters and individuals were done at the same time. Yeah.
No extra work,
No extra
opportunity, no cost.
Film
Probably
one set of videos for all of it.
also, I mean, there's got to be some corporate issues with, like, let's say they were going to run their own semifinals and they got to sit down at a negotiating table with potential sponsors. I don't think there's a huge line of sponsors like, yes, we want to work with you to do this right now. So this is probably it's probably should be something that we're like really grateful is happening, that it didn't like, fold up and that it's on and it's going to be another thing, as opposed to like criticizing what we don't like about it. But I think that's just like, it's just human nature.
Well, not only that, we're not just criticizing it. I mean, as we're going through this, I'm thinking through the athletes that I coach, because I do coach that group of semifinal level.
We have a pulse on that.
I have
part of the community.
I have a lot of those people, and I'm thinking about like how do I explain to them what a good season for them might look like. I've got Frankie Mastriani, who qualified for Fittest at Coast, and we actually just had a conversation yesterday, and I said, hey, approach this like this would be your semifinal. And I was like, whatever happens for the rest of the season, whatever. Go try and win this thing. Like, let's see what happens. We'll put all our eggs in this basket instead of all our eggs in the CrossFit basket, and let's go see what happens.
Yeah, that was kind of an actionable I took away after the games anyway, because I think a lot of people were really emotional, especially that I was connected to, because I was there, and it was a tough experience. And then I think there's still that lagging. Like, it hasn't been fully resolved. There's still people that don't want to participate and all of that type of stuff. But when I left, I was like, everybody still wants to keep getting better at fitness and want to have opportunities to do it. So it's going to happen and evolve. And while this was a tragic evolution that I think will be the most major shift we've probably ever seen, there was kind of a shift every single year that we've been doing this. COVID was not easy for us. They've done online qualifications to the games before anyway. So everything that we're kind of seeing in this is not really that new. I don't think it requires people to go crazy. And the people that are upset with CrossFit that don't want to participate, like, maybe this is just an easy opportunity for you to be like, all right, well, I'm not going to participate this year. Like, go find your other competitions.
There's plenty of them.
There's plenty. And I think there's going to be more popping up. And I think then we'll start to see, like, in the next season of CrossFit, did they do something to re-earn affiliate and market trust? Were there signups? And that'll give us an indication of what that side of the sport is. We'll have time to see what the new things that pop up are, and whether they executed well and how many people like them and if they're new and they're different. And then I think that will allow people to start to get continuity to reshape their season plans. But I think in the meantime, if you love this, just like keep getting better and like keep finding whatever opportunities come up to keep getting better, and don't overthink the season of next year before you know what happens, because we still haven't even gotten an announcement. Like, we're just still like waiting.
Still rumor.
So if this is the case, are you guys telling your athletes not to do the open, or what?
No way. I'm definitely telling them to continue to
do the open, but it's not their number one goal.
If as long as they're comfortable with that, if there's someone who says, I don't want to support I don't.
Well, you
want
just
to
said, you talked about Frankie doing Fittest of the Coast. So like he would do that and then
still
go into the open, and then he's.
The way I look at it is it's like diversifying your investments.
Sure.
Right. So
your fitness investments.
Your fitness investments, right? So originally everyone would go YOLO for CrossFit.
Right. This is the one thing. Yeah.
All in on CrossFit. And now for this season, I'm telling people like, hey, let's take a more diversified investment, more diversified portfolio this year, and spread out the investments.
I had that talk with people before this year. It's not like a reaction to the, I think we've done a podcast about it.
Yeah. And I was going to ask you to actually dive into that. Maybe explain why you think that's a good idea for people. Like you said, and you were saying it before any of the changes and whatever. Why is that how you feel about that?
Well, I don't think online competitions are a skill to get good at. And we have said it, and we launched the Throwdown originally for that, to teach people, hey, there's a set of standards. You get a new workout. You don't know what it is. The format might be different. It might have different standards in it. You got to strategize, do it. Most of the time in an online qualifier, you got to do it again and repeat it 2 days later. that's a specific skill set. And like, there are certain athletes that are really good at it. You see their name at the top of the leaderboard every time it's an online qualifier. The workouts are specifically written a little bit different. They're more like benchmarky, 20-minute AMRAPs, lots of reps. Going to an actual competition in fitness is way different. There's running, there's heat, there's the more sprint style workouts, there's more odd objects, there's the pressure of having to do it in person. There's bad judging calls that you don't normally get in your own gym.
Not your own equipment.
Yes, the timing is all different. The fact that you got to be next to other people, the details of transitions. Like if you set up in the gym, it's like a phone booth for fitness. You're in one area, but you're then at a competition with a 90-foot floor. Those transitions now add to like minutes in the workouts. I think all of those skills are skills that people should have. And I think the life experience is good. Like putting yourself in challenging experiences like that helps you grow as a human, where being in the gym it still helps you grow as a human, but it's your comfort zone. Like, you know, if I do the ergathlon, I take a shower at my house, I drive here, I do the workout, I go home, and I forget about it. But if I have to... Well, I didn't shower. I was
talking about
Did you forget about it?
You remember.
I didn't forget. I pulled back the result of it, so I didn't look.
Did you win?
Yes,
I don't know.
did. Yes, me and Brandon won, and Travis. But it's not like it's not really stepping out of my comfort zone. It's where I am every day. It's like it's my workspace, and that's true for a lot of people. And I think for a hobbyist, that's okay. If you're just showing up to classes, the Open might be your competition. You're like, maybe you got work and you don't want to go to Miami and compete. But I think for people that are aspiring to compete and get that experience, I don't think that the Open season structure has ever provided that for people. And I have expressed that to people before all of the stuff happened that caused market friction. I just think it's a different thing. And I think it's more enjoyable from what I've seen.
I agree. Yeah, I think doing in-person competitions is way more enjoyable, especially for the hobbyists.
Yes.
I'm just like, I know I keep bringing back like the maybe that inside the bell curve people, you know, not all these elites, but
not
like
the wings.
Yeah, like just enjoy it. Like go find a local competition, do maybe a weekend throwdown at a gym that you're not used to going to and compete. Like that is so much fun. And every time someone does that, like any of my clients, they come back and they're like, man, it reminded me why I do this.
Yeah.
And the Open usually doesn't do that. Usually everyone's stressed out by the Open and looking at the leaderboard, whereas even if they don't do well in the in-person competition, they enjoy just the environment and the whole process that goes into that. So I definitely would encourage people to do that.
We were talking about this before the podcast. I miss the old like throwdown style. Like,
yeah.
We were talking about, I was at a gym pretty close to here not that long ago, and they had like 2011 Atlanta throwdown circuit champions, 2012 Atlanta throwdown champion circuit. And like they had all of these all the way up until 2018, and then it stopped. And I just think that's a loss for communities and a loss for the major part of the bell curve, because then you can be part of this team, your affiliate team,
so much
your
fun.
Gym, and you go and you do these throwdowns and you compete against another gym. You're just throwing down. It's like a dual meet, you know, like in high school you had, you know, you played another football team, or we had dual meets against other swim teams. You guys wrestled and it's just like something that bonds you with the people, and it's a great experience. And I think it's a shame that those don't exist anymore.
Chris said it in the video that he did about Lydia and the crash experience, just the old school vibes. Yep. And the old school vibes, Travis did the garage games back in the day in Atlanta. There was Noah did all of these competition circuits in South Florida. The competitions were in the gyms. They were in public parks. Like things weren't.
They were fun though, man.
It was awesome. Like I understand we've made the push for professionalism, because obviously like there's a business component to it, and you have to make money. You got to pay for things in your life. So like having a professional sport would be really nice. But the passion that really hooked the current generation was prior to that professionalism. There was some of it happening in the CrossFit Games stuff, but there were just a lot of opportunities to just get together and like measure up. And I think that will potentially come back. I think COVID was one of the things that slowed that down a little bit. And I know the changes in the sport too, but I think this has been kind of a catalyst for being like, oh, that's coming back more. And now more people are caring about it. And I think Hyrox did a good job with at least highlighting the fact that people are interested in that. You know, like they hosted a competition in London on a back-to-back days. I think had 8,000 people on both days show up to sell out. So think about that. There's 16,000 people that wanted to spend their weekend going to an event, to
running 8K,
run 8K and get slammed by all the stuff. It's like it's there. It's just I think it needs to be rethought a little bit. And I don't think that I love and really have had a lot of awesome experiences in the open. And I'm not going to be 100% anti-CrossFit. That's just not how I feel. There are definitely aspects that I've verbally complained about, but I do think that vibe has never been provided by CrossFit as the main organization. It was always peripheral comps. So this is an opportunity for CrossFit to be like, all right, they made their competition more seamless. And in doing that, maybe it works better for them and for certain people, but it opened up the playing field to be like, all right, well now people realize there's this opportunity in the market and it's good. Like it'll decentralize the system, which is I think what we needed. Like we've talked about you can play basketball, but not be in the NBA. But in CrossFit, you can't really do that because you're like, the company owns the name of the sport. Yeah, they question if you're not doing it exactly like them. Is it CrossFit? So I feel like it needed to decentralize away from a company that was also a training methodology and be built as a sport somehow with some sort of congruence with clear standards and clear parameters and maybe a different name. And I think that's probably just going to happen organically now. Like the games was a catalyst for it to happen. And CrossFit will maybe be a part of that and help facilitate it, or it will be separate, or it will be like PGA Tour and Live, where it'll be separate and then they'll come back together and
could be
work
like
together.
triathlon, like we were talking about beforehand, where ITU just absorbed the other one. Like the other one went bankrupt and got taken over by the other organization. So
and if private equity wants to get out of CrossFit, maybe they spin the sport off and sell it to somebody new. So I don't know. I
could see CrossFit HQ being a perfect sponsor for whatever the sport is. If you look at it that way, it's like, hey, title sponsor is CrossFit.
Yeah, that
Go
makes
check
more
out
sense.
their.
This is a sport of fitness, and then CrossFit HQ is just kind of sponsoring it. It's like, this is the methodology that will get you the best at the sport of fitness and have it like another name for it.
At that point, does CrossFit just become another training camp that's a competitor against us?
Possibly.
I think it would.
Yeah.
We'd crush them.
I don't know. They had a little bit more resources. That model is exactly the sport of round net and spike ball. And on their website, they have a explanation of why they didn't name the sport spike ball, because they thought that it would basically stop the growth of it, because then you have to protect your brand name and you have to stop people. Like it prevents you from growing the sport if you can't say like, oh, what are you going to do? I'm going to play fitness. Like you have the name of like, oh, I'm going to play round net. You could play it on spike ball thing. You could play it on another thing. So they had to separate the brand and the sport. And I think that we've said that a lot on podcasts. I think it's just now like probably a more realistic outcome that it's happening now. I don't know the details of how it's happening. But
I got two more things real quick. A minute ago, you mentioned High Rocks, and I just want to give anyone a pro tip. You said that they were in London, and a ton of people emerged on that for 2 days. If you have a daughter in the Girl Scouts and you see a High Rocks event is coming to your area, go plant her in the parking lot and make your billions, boo-boo.
That is a good idea.
Okay, so there's that. But the other thing is I was on Coffee Pod Wad's debate show the other day. One of the topics was that they had heard that the teams are going to be pulled from the traditional season, kind of like Masters and kind of like adaptive and teens. Thoughts on that and how it might impact our team athletes?
I mean, I thought that was a realistic outcome too. I wondered when that was coming. There's still a lot of like bigger stars that do it in CrossFit. So there's going to be people that are upset by that, but I think that should just go to those things should just be at those sanctionals, probably.
I think that there's going to be people that are upset with it at first, but I think that it affords the opportunity to separate the team season and the individual season so that people that compete individually can also compete on teams. Like if you had the team world championships in December and then the individual world championships in July or August, then athletes could do both. Like that's a really viable way to create a long-term like successful sport here.
And keep engagement high throughout the year, which is like what the NFL has done. They spread their season out so that there's more people talking about football throughout the year.
And it's going to beat people up less. Like the high-level athletes don't have to be ready to compete at a high level individually all year long. They can spread out some of the damage amongst their team.
And more super teams in the teams.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, really I actually still think, and I know this is going to be a hot take, but to this day, watching the teams of 3 at Wadapalooza when it was like 3 males, as that's the division, and then 3 females, was way more fun to watch than the 2 and 2 that we've had over the last couple of years.
I feel like we're in the minority
just because of splitting them.
Well, I know people don't like that. Some teams don't like that idea because they like the pairs. But
I
it was so
like
much
that
fun.
idea, Brandon, and I feel like me and you are in the minority on there. Anytime I bring it up, it seems like people aren't. I brought it up on that debate show the other day, and they were kind of all like, "Nah." Hiller actually had an interesting one.
You brought that up on the debate show?
I brought up the teams of 3 would be a cool.
It is. If you watch Wadapalooza, it was a blast.
The races are way better.
Oh man, they were so good.
Yeah, because the athletes are all closer together. If you have 4 and 4, and there's 2 girls, 2 guys on the team for 10 heats, there's usually like limitations on either side, and then it just slows the race down. You have a bottleneck.
I mean, the male-female thing is cool, and it's novel in its own way. That is cool. I just, for my money, I think watching the girls versus the best girls and guys versus the best guys is fun.
Agreed.
Yeah.
But he proposed an idea that I hadn't heard, which was teams of 2, 1 male, 1 female. What do you think about that?
Cool.
It still would. You'd have such a bottleneck there after the top.
Yes, but you'd have more likelihood of good races, I think, with that.
Yeah.
Because there's just, I mean, even just in depth of athletes, maybe I'm hot taking myself here, but in depth of athletes, there is more higher level competitive male athletes overall in the sport. So when you have teams of 4, 40 teams, if you just go down like the depth chart of the sport, the level of athlete, if you could take like, what is this athlete as a percentage of the best athlete in the sport, the people that are generally speaking going to be on the girls' side of teams, of the lower teams, are going to be farther away from what the top standard is. And so they'll potentially like pull down and slow the race down a little bit. But I don't know. That seems better than 4 people.
It definitely seems better, but I still, if you're thinking about viewership and like being able to watch an event, having multiple barbells, that one's this weight because the male has to use this barbell and the female has to use this one. What do you do if there's a worm or like
heights of the pull-up bars?
Pull-up bar,
pick girls
it's just
up.
It would be way cooler if it's just streamlined down the lane, and that's what they were able to do at Wadapalooza a couple years ago when there were a lot of really good teams there.
I also think too, having now watched years of people trying to make teams, reducing that number to 3 or 2 probably would just be easier to make teams. Like, I mean, I know it used to be 6 and then it got down to 4, but it still seems like it's pretty challenging to get a group that, can all train at the same time, who like each other, whatever, or vibe, or have the same similar strengths or whatever.
I had also considered a team competition that was like we owned at one point the Southeast Affiliate Club trophy when I was at CrossFit Delray Beach in like 2010. It was like this cool totem that had like all the names of people that had won it. I think it was like 2010 or something when we made the games. I think they should bring some sort of like affiliate cup style competition back. And I think if you did something like that and maybe change the nature of it, you could have bigger teams, and it could be more like, hey, there's a workout, there's 10 people on a team, and I know grid was not the best example because it didn't work, but it could be grid style races where like the different athletes on the team did different things. Like you send out
people on the bench.
Yeah.
So you pull from your group rather than everybody.
Grid is still going.
Yeah,
it's still going,
but there was so much financial failure and lack of viewership and people that got burned that I think the actual grid of what people think of the grid league is different than what is existing now in grid. But that same concept that I think could actually have some legs if it wasn't trying to be the professional viewer side of the sport. It was more like, hey, we're going to have this to see what the best gym is. And you can send your strong guy out. You could send your strong girl out, and you could like build the tests in a different way where it was more community oriented. I think things like that could be okay, but I think for team viewership, if it was a sport, I think what you said, like either guy or guy, and that's how like tennis doubles. They do have doubles girls, doubles guys, and then they have mixed doubles. But I would imagine the best viewing is like when Serena and Venus are on the same team playing, other people. Or
they,
I know they're
are they
retired.
still playing?
No. Yeah. But
I mean,
that was my
still
generation. That's all I know.
What are your thoughts about them removing it from the games, though? Is that a good step forward?
I mean, I think we could all see it coming. I don't know. I think it'll make
when are people going to go buy their popcorn and their lunch and their T-shirts?
It's going to definitely change the games. I couldn't really get a feel.
That was a joke, team people.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be its own competition. Just like the Masters Games, and the Masters Games this year was at least for me much more enjoyable, and I think for the athletes too. It was just everyone was paying attention to the Masters athletes. It wasn't this afterthought like it was at the games for the last 10 years.
But if CrossFit wasn't willing to do the semifinals as a competition and they only want to have one thing, then they probably are not going to be the people putting on that competition. So again, it's like once they define clearly and explain what they're doing, I feel like the market will kind of shape around that based on what the void is. And if they say, hey, there's no teams, I do think it opens up one of these event organizers or a new league or whatever to be like, oh, one of our things is going to be a team competition only. And maybe it could potentially be really cool. It could be like you have pro teams, RX teams, masters teams, teen teams, and you can make a whole competition where it's all just team workouts. I think that could be a pretty cool event.
I love the idea as long as they do it where it doesn't conflict with the individual season. If someone fills that void and they set it up in December or January or February where it doesn't really conflict with the individual season, that would be so awesome. I would love to compete on a master team with Brandon and Mike, a team of 3.
Yeah, it'd be a blast.
Brandon and Mike, that would be incredible.
Yeah. Most of
Because you're a masters now, right? You just turned 35.
Oh,
look at this.
Brandon.
Look at this.
What happened to you, Brandon? You used to be so young. We should do a whole podcast with the master.
That'd be great. I actually have a question since we're talking about elites and the kind of season. The one problem that we had with sanctionals last time was the standardization. And I'm not going to name any names, but like a competition may have lighter loads and they were longer workouts, and that kind of selected a certain type of athlete. And then another competition had really heavy loads and really short workouts. And so then you get all these different styles of athletes to the games. Is that a problem or is that fine?
I think it could be pretty cool to do that and just let people have a bias. Okay, that's the heavy comp. Yep. And then all the powerhouses are showing up to that one. Yeah. And it's going to self-select for that. And maybe there's an endurance one. I think if CrossFit Games stays the pinnacle of the sport and they're the ultimate testing grounds of the sport, which I think is a big if, especially with the rumors going out. But if they are, it's their job to then provide the well-rounded test of fitness
at the games.
Yeah. Because it's never been like the best well-rounded athletes were never the ones that got self-selected from the open to regionals. It was like, are you really good at open style tests? Like we would have people that if you took them and could just put them in semifinals would have had a shot to make the games, but they could never get through the first stage. It wasn't balanced. Yeah. It was like very overly body weight and overly breathing based. So I think there's been a precedent for that to be okay. And then I think it could almost be fun for the event organizers to be like, all right, I'm going to put my spin on this. Maybe one of them is like, all super high skills. One is heavy, one is well-rounded. And we just create the standardization by saying like, what's the minimum requirement or like, what are the movements you're allowed to do?
Those are the buckets I was talking about at the beginning of the podcast. Like you have to have an endurance event that lasts more than 15 minutes. You have to have each of
You're not just showing up and it's a
so
strong
funny
competition.
that we consider endurance anything over 15 minutes in CrossFit.
I was a swimmer, so to me an endurance event was the 500 freestyle, which is 4.5 minutes.
Yeah. You're like, oh my goodness.
That's so long.
Noah is this weekend. Is Rogue next weekend?
Next.
He's doing an Ironman on Saturday and then flying to Scotland and doing the competition. And we 7 weeks ago or something, he sat down and kind of told me his plan and what he was doing. We talked through it, and there's so much volume.
It's crazy. I know.
I'm like, hold on, wait, you're going to be on the bike for 5, or it was either 5 or 6 hours or something like that. And I was like, oh, I do hour-long zone 2s or 2 hour, and my butt crack is in so much pain. Yeah, but it's just a different world, I feel of endurance.
You also he has
That's
a
why
comfy. I'm sure he has a comfy seat. You don't have a comfy seat on that concept.
And
2
he's
bike.
got aero bars and like the whole setup, but still.
Yeah,
Still.
I don't want
different world.
Yeah, I don't want my Grundle on a seat for that long.
Minus the format of how it might change or whatever. Let's pretend everything was back to normal and whatever. What would you hope to see out of the Open this year as far as workout selection and then quarterfinals? If you were like, all right, here's what we're doing. How do you hope they make it better this year?
Continuity of tests, something that makes sense across each one, where there aren't repeat tests, because I've been through so many of I've particularly as a masters athlete, I've been through Open, quarterfinal, semifinal online, and I know you said don't worry about that, the semifinal being online, but that's still the master season where we did shuttles in all 3 stages.
Yeah.
And I did a mile of shuttles in one of those stages, and I was just like, come on, have some continuity of testing. So if you do 50 shuttles in the first one, don't do 50 shuttles in the second one and 100 shuttles in the third. Just understand that the same people are doing the same damn tests across the board, and make sure that you have a story that's being told across it, rather than just this is a good test of fitness. Oh, I forgot about what we did in the first one. Here's another good test of fitness.
Yeah. Yeah, I think actually last year was, aside from things like that, I feel like it was pretty good. I think my personal preference would be a very clear advancement in the skill sets and weights as you go. So that way the test for the Open to segment to get the top 25% is built appropriately for that level of people. Even if it's a little boring for the elites, who cares? They're not taking it seriously anyway. Just do the workouts and get through. Quarterfinals builds on those things. It's not the same thing. It's not like you did a 1 rep max clean in the first stage and then a 3 RM front squat in the second one, or change the patterns up, whatever. But I think the level of complexity going up, and then maybe the just communication, floor plans, giving us time to actually be able to run these appropriately. But I think actually they've done a pretty good job with making changes to the online. The biggest one that I hope changes is, how do they freaking watch the videos and assess penalties? Last year I was heartbroken because one of my athletes got the penalty thing, but I was also just kind of frustrated because there were a lot of people that are really good that deserve to be at the next stage that didn't get to because of penalties, but the penalties were not uniformly assessed. Some people, I looked at the videos, I'm like, this isn't a major penalty. Okay, fine. You want to take some seconds, you want to show them that these aren't perfect, fine. But I've seen stuff in person by the head judges of CrossFit that I'm like, that's just not a fair application of penalty. And it's the one thing where I'm like, if we're going to professionalize and it's all online, we got to do a better job of policing it.
Part of solving that, though, is movement selection, is making sure that you choose movements that can be evaluated clearly in a video online qualifier, versus the step up, which there's so much subjectivity. Just make that a step over, and then you don't have to worry about it. Simple decisions like that, which just require a little bit of foresight, I think would improve the experience for everybody dramatically.
Yeah, you're still going to have problems, though, because they've the deadlift, that's one that should be simple, but it's not because of the bouncing of the bar and the shoulders
Make them
behind.
dumbbell deadlift, right? Don't put deadlift in the online stages of the qualifier.
But if each stage is online, that would be, how heavy can you go? People don't have deadlift or dumbbells. So I think that's the limitation of doing everything online. I know that wasn't your question, Chris, but we're going to run into that, especially at semifinals for the elite athletes who are trying to make it to the games. The standards get really tight there. Everyone's trying to sprint, and if you're sprinting even an air squat, it's really hard to make sure that you stand all the way up and get to depth every time.
Yeah. I think the solution for that is just define the standards more clearly, and then define the penalties appropriately, and then assess them relative to what happened. Not just oh, these aren't good, there's 10 of them that aren't good, that's a major penalty. I'm like, well, if this is our only chance and they're not good, but they just bent their arms a little bit on the balance, or they didn't stand all the way up, maybe that could be a half a second a rep or a second a rep, and it's just clearly defined. Then you get your appeal, and it's hey, reps 1, 2, and 3 in round 1, 5, 6, and 7 in round 2 were all bad. Here's your penalty, and it's applied to everybody on the leaderboard that matters. I don't know if that's logistically possible with the money and time and whatever, but either that or we just have to be more lax with the standards of online comps, because if it can't be enforced, don't make a really tight rule. Or like if you say no bouncing the deadlift, it's like, okay, well, what does that mean? Or does it mean that your arms can't bend before you hit it? Does it mean that literally the bar has to dead stop on the ground in between every rep?
They don't even have to do that. Like I said, movement selection can solve that. So just instead of saying you can't bounce a deadlift, make it hand release deadlift.
Yeah.
This is what I'm saying. Just requires this like tiny bit of foresight and creativity, and they can solve almost all of those problems by either not putting those movements like touch and go deadlift or, the box step up where it's like, oh, you got to stand all the way up. Well, can you tell if someone's staying all the way up if the camera's to the front?
Yeah.
Like, get rid of those things. Just put in movements in your online qualifying stages that have clear standards that can be clearly judged, and then test those things when you get to the live event, period. If you do that.
And then it's their job to do the subjective side of judging. Yeah. I like that. I hate having, I also feel stupid. It's like we have autonomy to judge, but really our judging doesn't matter at all. So I'm like, why am I here? Should I just count and just say, okay, you did the right amount of reps, like CrossFit's going to penalize you or not?
We've brought in games judges for it too. I know we've talked about that.
Still got penalties.
Right. So it's definitely tough. I appreciate that they're giving no reps, but to your point, it's not standardized. It's just kind of like random. Who knows if they're just picking random people and saying, oh, we got to do this one because it looks kind of iffy or.
And it's not all the way down too.
No.
It's like, only the top 200. I'm like, but that's on a quarterfinal leaderboard. That's thousands of people.
Well, it's a perfect example of someone like me who, if I did the quarterfinal workouts, let's say there's 5, I probably could beat a lot of the games athletes in the 2 that are like more endurance bias, or like the wall ball burpee box jump over test. And so now I water it down because they're never going to check my videos, because the other 3 events, maybe I got like 5,000th place, but I got 20th in this one and 21st in this one. But if there are 50 of me, that moves someone down the leaderboard, and now all of a sudden they don't get in.
Yeah. And I know there are, like, we're taking it seriously. You got to judge, whatever. But a lot of the scores on the affiliate leaderboards are people that are just in class. And you're supposed to have a judge, and you still have people that are validating it. But people are just like, you could be doing a workout and they're like, oh, I miscounted my rounds. Yeah, I think I did 8. And that score goes on a leaderboard.
Exactly. Yeah.
It matters a lot for people trying to get through. So
on that note, now that we have some time behind it, what did y'all think from going from 10% to 75% for quarterfinals? What's your thoughts on how that played out? Did you like it?
Brandon.
I have no thoughts. I mean, I think it's cool. Like, again, I'm more concerned with, I'm very passionate about those that are competitive, and we want them to succeed. But I'm also very passionate about those that are inside the bell curve. I know I keep saying that. That's a majority of the CrossFit audience. Most of us will never make the games, never make a semifinal, but we love the sport, and we need those people to stay invested in the sport to continue to grow it too. So I think it's great to have more of those people be able to make a quarterfinal. But now if the season shifts to, maybe CrossFit's not as important, I would encourage people to do more competitions and just go out there and have a blast. Like, do 3, 4, 5 competitions throughout the year. And I know that's not your question, but that's just my answer to your question.
Ask it from Brandon, from the athletes that you coach perspective. Do you feel like they liked that it was opened up to 75?
No, because the people that I coach are still high level. But I think I get a different view of those that are in Compete, our online program, where there are a lot of people that are coming in that, for example, in our intermediate path, they're like, hey, I still need handstand push-ups, ring muscle ups, and handstand walk. They enjoy it because they may not have those skills, but they still were able to squeak in because they're fit enough, right? And then their journey is, okay, next year to get a higher percentage, I need to get those 3 skills that I just listed off, and that's what they work on.
So for that group, it was a net positive.
Yeah,
it was
totally.
Like, hey, now I can see where I'm at.
Totally.
Yeah, I think it was like a pro or con relative to where you fall. The people that are like 95th percentile and up didn't care. The people that are around that 90% bubble, I think, were really upset because it was their version of like belting up.
Yeah. It was their target for 2 years.
It was, they got their belt.
Are some of these problems created? I know that it could be cool on one hand and then maybe problems on the other, where you have the open division, like the everybody's, and the people who are trying to do it as pros all doing the same thing. Would it clear things up to just be like, hey, if you want to do this as a pro, you're going to sign up for this path and pay this amount? And
I would love that. I think the athletes would. I think I've talked to a bunch. I said, hey, if you knew that everybody that was in the pro division was going to be drug tested more regularly and more comprehensively, and every video was going to be watched properly
Yep.
and assessed normal penalties, would you pay more? And I mean, it's easy to say you'd pay more. So, and then like if you actually did it and actually see it, but I do actually think that would be better.
I think they would.
I do too.
But how many people would sign up that maybe shouldn't sign up?
For the pro one?
Yeah. Would that be an issue?
I don't think so. And what's the downside of that?
Yeah,
they
they
just
just
get
got
more
their
money.
money.
They just get
yeah.
last.
Yeah. And then you just have tiers. You say like, okay, like, you know, like the US Am tour that we did, there were no like extra judges there or whatever. Like I'm sure if you had questionable character, you could fluff your lie and move it unless your playing partner saw it, which like I know when I was playing, I was like in the zone of trying to just play. I was like trying not to fall apart. I wasn't watching whether the people I was playing with were cheating. But I think that is just accepted and not cared about, because I'm like, whatever, if this guy's cheating and doing it and wins this amateur tournament, I don't really care. I think that would allow the hobbyists to be like, all right, cool, like we put our money in, maybe we get a t-shirt or whatever, or we just get to be on this global leaderboard, but I don't need to obsess about having a judge and whatever.
Sure.
I'm just like putting my score up and I don't need to video it.
That model has already been proven to work. That's what Wadapalooza does. They have a separate division for intermediate. They have It is the Coast has a separate division, separate workouts for.
They don't charge more though, do they?
No,
And they don't watch
But what I'm
every
saying
video.
is they could charge more for those, and if they did that, then they would. I think that would just be the next step. But what I'm saying is having the split division online qualifier model has already been proven to work. People self-select to the correct divisions, and sometimes people screw up. Like they might go intermediate and like win the intermediate qualifier, and sometimes people are like, oh, like I won that by a lot. I should probably not have done this, and then they pull themselves out.
I don't even think it needs to be done by level. I think it just needs to be done by like you have an official leaderboard and then you have a community leaderboard. And on the official leaderboard, I would think even if you took like whatever, your 50th percentile on the official leaderboard, that somebody might feel more proud of that than being, you know, just on the community leaderboard in a higher place.
Let's do that for the throwdown from now on. So you can pay $20 and you'll have your video.
yeah.
$20 per week.
Practice competing, but also yes. I don't want to be reviewing every one of those videos.
But it's $20, Max.
Yeah, we would just have to pay somebody.
We
like,
wouldn't be
"All right, watch
complaining
these
about the reviews anymore.
That's true. Yeah.
All right, well, that's probably a good place to end it. Let's just go ahead and cap this off with Kyle. Who you voting for?
I did a write-in.
No.
I did a write-in for Voldemort.
Voldemort. Nice. Brandon?
Don't even.
Harry? You voted for Harry? And Max?
All right.
I voted for Brandon.
I actually
Brandon
would vote
for president.
Brandon, I think.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that.
I would.
All right, boys.
All right, everyone. Enjoy next competition season, even though we don't know what it is.
Well, you could know what it is. You could plan out your own competition season.
That's true.